Well, hello and welcome to Rotary Youth Exchange students 2019-2020. I wanted to introduce my friends that I brought here. We're going to have a conversation with you today. We totally honor that your return in a pandemic doesn't look the same as a return under usual circumstances. So I brought a couple of friends I want to introduce to you that will give us some ideas and resources on how to move through this time. So here to my left, I'm not sure what's showing up on your screen, is my friend Fran Hochhausen. She is the current district chairman of 5360 and lives in Calgary, Alberta. What makes Fran awesome is not only amazing experience in Rotary Youth Exchange, her own daughter completed the program, so she's a mother of a Rotex, as well as she has hosted 16 students with her husband Phil. So tremendous amount of experience. And I would like to introduce my friend, Dr. Mary Berge. Mary lives in Johnston, Pennsylvania, is from District 7305, and combined with her husband has hosted 9 Rotary Youth Exchange students. And what gives Mary some great credentials for us today is she's also a licensed clinical psychologist. So we wanted to have a chat with you, pull up a chair, maybe make some hot chocolate or tea, and listen to some of the ideas and tools that we're going to offer you to explore this process of returning as an exchange student. And I should say by proxy, my name is Pauline Perot. I about forgot myself. In 1998, 1999, I was a Rotary Youth Exchange student. I did my exchange in the former East Germany. In present day Germany it was then and is now. Was an amazing experience, but under usual circumstances I would say there was some pretty tricky times for me as I was trying to come home and reintegrate myself into Canada. And I will tell you that there were days that I wished I was in Germany again, and that battle kind of raged on and on as the highs and lows ebbed as to where I really wanted to be. Who was I after this amazing experience? I, as an exchange student, felt like I had a particular platform. I stood out in my school, probably because of my language skills. Everybody knew who I was. And then when I came back to Canada, it was a bit of a fall from grace. So Mary, I want to toss the first question over to you and have you weigh in on the highs and lows. How can students deal with this flow, ebb and wave when they come home? Some days are good, some are bad. What kind of tools might you have there?
Thanks, Pauline. So yeah, reverse culture shock is a real thing. So when you're re-entering your home country after being abroad, it is certainly a challenge. And you said the word roller coaster. I really think that's what it's all about. And that is normal. The highs and lows are expected when returning home from a youth exchange experience. There's a lot of phases that are very typical that most youth exchange go through. The first one, when you arrive back home, it's usually you feel disengaged. There's almost a sadness, like you said. You feel like you want to go back. I've had kids, on my doorstep walking away to go home and crying and saying, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home after a year. This is sense of loss. So immediately you think in terms of grief. These kids are grieving the loss of their youth exchange. So they become very sad and disengaged upon returning. That's usually the first stage that we see. Secondly,
can I just add in there, as a story? I remember the first time, I had slowly unpacked my suitcase and I was washing all my clothes, but then came a couple items I hadn't washed, and it smelled exactly like my host family's house, as laundry does. And it's like a kid holding on to like a little blanket. It was honestly one of the most painful things. It gives me goosebumps now when I remember having to wash that last piece of clothing, because that was forever going to get that smell out of my memory. So grief's a really great word for that start.
And there's a grief process, for everybody, and it's usually not a smooth, one-way track. So ups and downs are to be expected. Typically after that sadness phase is out a bit, though, youth exchange will begin to get a sense of euphoria, elatedness to be back home. People are welcoming them home. People are excited to see them. There might be even some parties. So that is less of a challenge during that phase of the reverse culture shock. Thirdly, though, we then often see the children, I don't want to call them children, young adults, I should say, go into almost an alienation or disorientation phase where they might be more irritable and hostile, cranky, crabby. They don't know what to do with themselves. And that can last longer than we would hope. But once that phase begins to dissipate, we see normal readjustment and adaptation to just being back at home from their youth exchange and reintegrating into their normal neighborhood, family, school, jobs, that sort of thing. So those 4 phases are the typical of what we see. But I would say these ups and downs are going to probably be a bit more dramatic considering the pandemic circumstances. That has shifted the, so we call it the finish line. The youth exchange finish line got moved forward closer, so the kids had to return home sooner. So the end date became changed, and even their pandemic experiences in their visiting countries probably caused some grief reactions, to things that they lost that they weren't able to experience that they had expected to experience. So yeah, highs and lows are normal, but probably even more so during the pandemic experience.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for students who are really struggling with boredom? You know, when on exchange, everything seemed exciting because everything was new. Even towards the end, you might have had opportunities for new experiences. And after the original euphoria of coming home wears off, you see all the people you wanted to see. It's just like, this is just same old, same old.
Same old, exactly. Well, and I know we're going to talk a little bit later about the goals of Youth Exchange, but I would ask the students to reevaluate and revisit the goals that they initially had for Youth Exchange. And my guess is one of them was learning a new language. So one of the best things I think a Youth Exchange can do is to continue to connect to the things that they wanted to learn, continue to find ways to develop those skills that they were gaining while they were abroad. And also sharing their experience in as many ways as possible. So this would mean that they would need to plan, prepare, and predict. You'll hear me say that a lot through this talk. Plan for the fact and predict for the fact that you're going to be bored when you get home, especially the fact that we might still be in sheltering in place where you're at, or just maybe barely opening up from the pandemic. There's less to do in general. So if you can begin to plan a strategy for when we are go green and we're able to get out there and socialize again, if you can develop a plan to speak at clubs, go to schools, integrate with other organizations to talk about Youth Exchange, to talk about your experiences, to share the things you've learned. I would think that's probably one of the best ways to stave off boredom. But a written plan is a stronger plan, so put it to paper. I don't know, Fran, maybe you have more thoughts too that you would want to share.
I think you have pretty much covered it. They do need to plan. They need to know that they will have ups and downs. But if they'd been home for that year, they would have had ups and downs as well.
Yeah, and to know that that's normal. Again, I want to normalize a lot of the experience that kids are going to have upon their return, that Youth Exchange have. The boredom is a natural part of it. We all get bored in life. Routine can be boring. So spice it up. What else do you want to learn? I mean, you just spent a year or 6 months or however many months somewhere else. What did you learn? You know, did you really believe you had that potential when you left? Imagine that, you know, this is another opportunity to create potential for yourself. So what things can you do now with this new experience that you have, how can you make that a platform for opportunity? What new things do you might want to still want to try in life? Just because we're in this very unusual time right now, life is not on pause. It is going just as fast as it has at any other time. What you choose to do with it is your choice. So a lot of it is within a student's own ability to choose how they're going to handle the situation.
Very wise words.
Well, you know, speaking of difficulties when getting home, and maybe Pauline, you can elaborate on this. I know we've heard about how it was very difficult for a lot of students to organize and secure their travel, and that in some cases the travel was very hard. You know, government-funded planes had to be secured and flights were canceled. What do you think? What can students do who are maybe still outbound to better prepare themselves for that journey and for the potential pitfalls that could occur along the way?
I think you've brought up a really great word, and that's plan, right? I think sometimes when a surprise isn't a surprise anymore and you've pre-thought of it and had a bit of an action plan at this, it's the same thing when most orientations I've attended around North America on the outbound leg, we talk about what happens if your luggage doesn't come, and what happens if your host parents aren't at the airport, and you kind of run them through all of these situations to prepare. I think it's prudent, important that on this return journey that it's the same thing. You've echoed the things that I've been hearing internationally. I've heard about government repatriated flights where a group of students from one country are collectively gathered and moved and flown from that location back to their home country. I've heard students whose flights have been canceled 3 times. In terms right now, because of course flight load, anticipated load, not sure how airlines are making those decisions, but I can appreciate if I put myself back into the emotional shoes of where I was when I left my exchange in July. That was probably one of the most painful experiences up until then in my life. Just to release and say goodbye and think about what that meant. I can't imagine if that was pulled for me 3 times that we did a starter run to the airport. I lived an hour and a half from the airport. So I think knowing if students haven't been in contact, that the beautiful part is exchange students are really connected. So they're going to know from the other students' stories that this might not be as smooth sailing as anticipated. So I think, and if you haven't heard from other students, then hear from us that we know there's been some pretty extraordinary and challenging circumstances. I've heard a student who had to take a taxi for 4 hours to get to Central Airport in South America to make their flight home. That was availability of host parents. That was not able to travel together in a vehicle. So there's all sorts of additional challenges. So I guess what I will honor is we know some of this is different. Perhaps you have some additional thoughts beyond planning as to how they
Yeah, I do. You know, you prompted some things in my brain here. First of all, something I use in psychotherapy a lot is the term mental flexibility. You know, we are what we think. If we were what we ate, I'd be a French fry, but we are what we think. So, you know, having mental flexibility means being prepared, of course, but also being able to change your cognition. So if you're experiencing anxiety and you're experiencing negative thoughts like, oh my God, this is awful, this is terrible, what if, the what if thinking is going to engage all the wrong parts of your brain, the parts that create anxiety in your mind. So the mental flexibility is the ability to catch yourself mid-thought in negative thinking and be able to be flexible and resilient enough to say, wait a minute, okay, I have tools I can use. I have contacts on my phone. I can FaceTime someone right now. I can text someone. I can call someone for reassurance. I have a backup plan. I have money in my pocket. You know, all the things that you can say to yourself to reassure yourself. Self-talk is so important, but sometimes, you know, I keep little cards around all the time with all sorts of things written down all over them, you know, little things, post little sayings to myself. Today, you know, I put one up on Facebook today that says, you know, I breathe in my courage and exhale my fear. I keep these things in my pockets because written to me is a reminder. So maybe even before the journey, writing some things down or putting little sayings like this where you can easily access them could be helpful during stressful times. There, you've got one too. See, what does yours say? Go confidently in the direction of your dream. Live the life you've imagined. See, we all do this. This is my favorite one for this morning. Excuses don't burn calories. So, you know, I think a list of written things that are reminders for you, what your tools are, what your mindset needs to be, reminding yourself to be in reality-based thinking, not what if thinking. What if thinking's in the future. There's a good resource you could use if you do become overly anxious on your journey home, or even once you've arrived back home and you're just feeling cruddy. A great resource called Bilateral Sound Therapy. You can just Google that, and it's a wonderful resource. You just plug in your earbuds and you close your eyes, and it's just this wonderful way to make yourself reduce stress and anxiety. So there's lots of little tricks like that, mindfulness exercises that you could do to keep calm. A calm brain is a brain that is able to problem solve and think through coping. So keeping your brain calm, which means keeping your anxiety centers shut down and your frontal lobe engaged, is important. So all of these little tricks are ways I think that kids could improve their struggles in getting home.
I love the idea that you said about making a list. I know in different facets of my life, they said, you know, if you're going to head into a high tense situation, you know, by preparing yourself, have your action plan, right? Whether it's, you know, as simple as maybe people are socially shy and they're heading into an event, then think about, well, here's the 5 things I can do if I feel really anxious about talking to other people. So I appreciate that as an important skill. And the other thing I want to highlight, I've heard from you a couple of times, I know has worked for me, is write it down. It's one thing to have pre-thought and kind of danced with the thoughts. It's another thing. I mean, all of us have something that looks like this that we can write it down physically, have it in a note in our cell phones, just so we're able to, okay, I don't feel like that tool, but yeah, this one speaks to me right now. So really like those ideas.
Yeah. And there's something visceral about paper, you know, and there's something cathartic about writing. Actually, science has found that, you know, the art of writing, printing, handwriting, whatever, there's something about that process that takes longer than, you know, doing with our thumbs. And also even, you know, just having an object, let's say, you know, you carry around a little rock that makes you feel reassured or something, even a piece of paper that you've written something in your pocket, you can just stick your hand in your pocket and just rub it. You know, those are your go-tos if you need them, you know. So there's something about all of our senses, sight, sound, smell, touch, you know, everything that, you know, these are great little, you know, cues for our body to stay calm.
Mm-hmm. Fran, I'm curious, I think most of your students have returned home now. Could you give us some ideas as to the thought process of coming home, of what they feel might be a bit early, and then maybe Mary has some thoughts on how they can deal with those thoughts?
Absolutely. We did a reentry. We've actually done several of them virtually with our students who came home. They came home early, not by choice. We brought them home. When we had our first session, I asked them to give me the first word that came into their mind about their early return. All of them had the same thought. They felt like a failure because they came home early. Mary, how do we work with this?
Yeah, you know, we have to remind all of our youth exchange students that COVID-19 caused the shift of the finish line. You did not fail. That you were not a failure. Nothing is going to be held back from you as far as opportunities, because our deadline, our finish line got moved inadvertently. The entire world's finish line got moved. The entire world, probably for the first time ever, experiencing the same exact thing. So your finish line was moved inadvertently. So that does not make you a failure. In fact, you finished on time. You cross the finish line where we had to strike it. It's just different than where it was the year before and where it might be next year. I had a youth exchange student from Sweden, and she always used to say, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And I think that's great advice from a 17-year-old Swede. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And in fact, your youth exchange experience is going to be so unique that you again have an opportunity for a platform to take this unusual and unique year, shortened albeit, but still fabulous and amazing and filled with unusual stories that no one else is going to ever have again, probably in our lifetime. Let's hope. No more pandemics. That you can actually, use that as a platform to maybe help others to deal with how many finish lines have been moved, high school graduations, proms. For me, I had all of these, conventions and conferences that I was going to be speaking at in Rotary. All of that was taken away, because of COVID. We share that experience maybe slightly differently from event to event, but we all can understand the feelings that that evokes. So you're part of a special group now by being a pandemic youth exchange student. So turn that negative into a positive, turn that adversity into something that you can help other people with. One of my favorite sayings, and I heard it again just the other day, is look back and be grateful, look forward and be hopeful, and look around you and be helpful. And I think that's what we need to see as far as you haven't failed. It's your exchange was simply different. If you stay in that mindset, you'll be present and be able to create opportunity from it.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you said. I know when typical advice when you're feeling under the weather, one of the quickest ways to get over that is help somebody else. And what so if I'm feeling sorry that I was cut short or the emotions I have around that, there's a whole lot of people that we see on social media, and you named all the key ones, from graduations, colleges, people not being there for the birth of their first grandchild, etc. There's a lot of life moments that people are missing. So what a great platform for me to take what I've learned as a student who also was affected by this and create some messaging and some hope for other groups of people outside of the exchange student world who are impacted. Really great stuff.
Yeah, and on that note, Pauline, I think you and I talked a little bit about, when kids are headed out there to share their experiences, ways that they can do that in a format or a platform that is more engaging and more dynamic. And I was wondering if you would share a little bit about that and how Youth Exchange can access your information on that. Absolutely.
So most students are going to be asked to give a report on how their exchange went to their sponsor club, so their home club. And my club student actually just gave hers back to her Canadian club this week. So perhaps it's also a thank you to the club that hosted you. And typically what I've seen exchange students do over the years is just a chronological category. I arrived at the airport, here's the airport, then here's my first host family, here's my school, at Christmas I moved, and they just go through the timeline. And there's a time and a place for that presentation. I think that's important as an exchange student to process your year that way and kind of go through the order of events. But if you really want to have impact to the Rotary audience, when you think back to why we as an organization do Youth Exchange, it goes back to creating world peace and understanding. So us as Rotarians are sitting in the audience thinking, how did this student benefit? How did they change? How are they a part of this world peace conversation? And so I have filmed, it's about a 25-minute video. I used it with Fran's district as well, and gave just some frameworks to think about. If you said, the 6 things I learned about myself on exchange, and build those 6 principles out for the 25-minute address to your Rotary Club, that would be the time. Maybe it's something like 4 things you would never know about Croatia unless you lived there. And then you bring, 4 things that you felt was fabulous, something that shows us some learning. So if you have the task of creating this presentation for your club, then we will link below in this video where you can go find the other one to get some tips on how to make great presentations. And I know Fran has also seen a lot of these in her club. Fran, can you share some of the impact, the importance of doing this, other than just the chronological? What's in it for us as Rotarians when we see a presentation that just really speaks to us?
I can do the opposite. When people see it, when Rotarians see I arrived in August and this is what I had for dinner that night, and this is, my host sister's horse. We all sit there and think, what does this have to do with why we sent you? Why, I'm really glad that your host sister had a horse, but what does that have to do with why we sent you there? And I'm really glad that they fed you, but it really has nothing to do with it. Tell me something special. How did Youth Exchange change you? What are you going to do with the knowledge and experience that you have? And this is what I hear from Rotarians in clubs. This is what they want to know. How are you going to move forward?
Impact, right? Impact, yeah.
Exactly. That's what we as Rotarians want to know. And I follow my students, all of them, my inbounds and my outbounds, for many, many years. I am still in touch with them. And I want to know what they're doing with their lives. How did this impact you? And the greatest joy I have is when they tell me things like, I started a program in Thailand for the blind because there wasn't one.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. Wow. That's impact.
That's what I want to know. That's what all Rotarians want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to Mary, your earlier comments, this is when students feel bored, there's something constructive that all exchange students need to do, and that is this presentation. And if your clubs don't ask you, please go ask them. And if you need help, work with your district chairman who will help talk to their colleagues in Rotary to get you that speaking opportunity. It's so important to you as a processing piece to have done it, but it's even more important for us as Rotarians to know that the investment of time and perhaps finances that they have put into you this year, that there's some sort of payoff. When we donate to projects, we want to see how did it turn out? And so exactly like Fran said, it really in your case is, how did you turn out? How did this turn out? How was this exchange year? And so I think it's a great way to channel some of the uneasiness that students often feel when they come home to put together this presentation.
And talk to clubs that don't participate in Youth Exchange.
Yes, that's probably the best place to go. I mean, you guys can sell it, and to know that, the people who sent you there, they're already proud of you. We're proud of you. It doesn't matter if it ended soon. Get out there and talk to people who don't know, and to be able to share your experience of how you managed through a pandemic. I mean, you did it. We are so proud of each and every one of you. So get out there. That's the best piece of advice, Fran, I have heard in a long time. Tell people who don't know about it.
Absolutely. And if you had a great experience with Rotary Youth Exchange, we don't want you to keep it a secret. We need, Mary and I were talking a couple days earlier, we don't need to look any further than our current climate to understand that world peace and understanding is needed more today than it ever has been before at any point in history. So to understand that you and I might look different, we might sound different, but at the end of the day, we're not all that different. It's an incredible gift that I think most of us got at a youth exchange. So the world needs to hear your experience. So help us grow the program and the impact of Rotary Youth Exchange by getting out there. So I want to be mindful, we're coming to the end of time here. Fran, Mary, any wrap-up thoughts, words, suggestions, advice for the students?
Again, my last word is I am so proud of each and every Youth Exchange student that weathered the storm this year. And even though it was shorter, it was still successful. And we're proud of you. And I can't wait to see how this will change you in the future.
And I can't wait to get together in person with all of my returning students. And they will be Rotex.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this. We hope that some of our thoughts, tools, resources, ideas have inspired you as students to think about what the next steps in your return journey look like. If you've yet to travel, we wish you safe travels. And thanks for choosing Rotary Youth Exchange. We are so grateful that you are part of our program this year. Take care.